You walk out to your garden in the middle of July with a heavy plastic jug of liquid fertilizer in one hand and a bag of premium compost in the other. You are sweating. You carefully scoop that dark, expensive soil around the base of your tomato plants and your pepper bushes. You feel like you are doing the right thing. You take your hose, you turn the water on, and you watch in frustration as half of that black gold simply washes away, running right off the dry mulch and into the walkway. You look at the plants a week later and the lower leaves are still yellowing. The growth is still sluggish. You wonder what you did wrong. You followed the schedule, you spent the money, you dedicated your Saturday morning to feeding your garden, but it feels like the plants are only getting a fraction of the meal. You look at the wild edge of your property where the weeds are growing thick and green with zero effort, and you feel a quiet sense of defeat. I want you to put the bag down and stop blaming yourself. You didn't fail. Your instincts are right. The model you were taught to use is what failed. We have been sold a system that treats garden soil like a sterile hospital bed where plants are on an IV drip. We are told that we have to constantly purchase external inputs, carry them to the garden, and spread them on the surface. We are taught to be the delivery mechanism. It is exhausting, and it is terribly inefficient. Think about the absurdity of the modern worm bin. We buy a $150 plastic hotel. We put it in the garage or under the kitchen sink. We feed the worms our scraps. We wait months. Then we sift through the slime, harvest the castings, carry them outside in a bucket, and scatter them on top of the soil, hoping the rain washes the nutrients down to the roots. We separated the biological engine from the garden bed. We made ourselves the middlemen in a transaction nature designed to happen automatically. The reason you are stuck in this loop of buying and hauling is honestly kind of annoying. It is because the alternative works too well and costs too little for anyone to bottle it up and sell it to you. You can completely bypass the garden center and the heavy lifting for about $5. You are going to build an in-ground worm tower. You are going to take the composting process and bury it directly into the center of your raised beds, exactly where the plant roots are desperately searching for food. This is not some crazy new invention. It is biological common sense. People have been burying their organic waste near their crops for centuries. But somewhere along the line, we got obsessed with tidy, square garden boxes, and we decided that kitchen scraps belonged in a distant corner of the yard. We are just bringing the old knowledge back to the front lines. The device you are building is simply a vertical tunnel that invites the native earthworms in your soil to do the delivery work for you. Here's what you actually need to build this underground engine. You don't need tools you don't already have. You need a length of 4-inch PVC pipe, about 2 feet long. If you have some scrap lying around from a plumbing project, use that. If not, a single pipe at the hardware store will cost you just a few dollars. If you don't want to use PVC, a cheap 5-gallon plastic bucket works just as beautifully. You just need a rigid container that can hold back the dirt. You also need a drill and a drill bit, about 1/2 inch in size. Take your pipe or your bucket out to the driveway. You are going to drill holes all over the bottom half of it. Don't be shy with the drill. You want dozens of holes spaced a few inches apart. Think of it like a piece of Swiss cheese. These holes are the doorways. They need to be wide enough for a fat, hungry earthworm to easily slide in and out of. If you are using a 5-gallon bucket, drill holes all over the bottom and the lower sides. You are building a subway station for your soil biology. Now, take that perforated pipe or bucket and walk out to your raised bed or your garden plot. Find a spot right in the middle of your heavy feeding plants, right between the tomatoes and the peppers. Take a shovel and dig a hole deep enough to bury the bottom half of your container. You want all of those drilled holes completely submerged under the soil line. If you are using a 2-foot pipe, bury it 1 foot deep. The top half, the solid part with no holes, sticks up above the dirt like a little chimney. Pack the garden soil tightly around the outside of the pipe so it stands straight and firm. It shouldn't wiggle. It is now a permanent structural part of your garden bed. Finally, you need a lid. If you bought a bucket, use the bucket lid. If you are using a PVC pipe, a standard plastic end cap, or even a heavy clay pot turned upside down over the opening is perfect. The lid is crucial. It keeps the heavy rain out, it keeps the sunlight out, and it keeps curious animals like raccoons from digging into your fresh system. You have just installed an automatic feeding and watering station directly into the root zone of your garden. That is the hardware. It took you 10 minutes and cost you the price of a coffee. But an engine is nothing without fuel. The magic starts when you walk back to your kitchen and look at what you usually throw into the garbage can. The banana peels, the coffee grounds, the wilted lettuce, the apple cores. All of that heavy, wet kitchen waste that makes your trash bags smell and leak. You are going to take those scraps, walk out to your garden, take the lid off your new tower, and drop them straight down the pipe. You don't need to chop them into microscopic pieces. You don't need to balance green and brown materials perfectly like a traditional hot compost pile. You just drop the raw fuel into the dark, damp belly of the earth. Put the lid back on and walk away. You have just set the dinner table. Now you let the physics and the biology of the soil take over. Inside that dark, cool pipe, the moisture from the kitchen scraps begins to release. The scent of decaying organic matter seeps out through the holes you drilled, moving through the surrounding soil. This is a biological beacon. Every earthworm within a few yards of that pipe senses the signal. They are drawn to it. They move through the soil, aerating it as they travel, creating tiny tunnels that allow oxygen and water to penetrate deeper than your hose ever could. They find the holes in your pipe and they move inside to feast. Once those worms are inside your buried pipe, they get to work doing what they have done for millions of years. They consume that rotting vegetation, breaking it down in their guts and absorbing the nutrients. But here is the brilliant part of this underground system. They don't stay in the pipe. The environment inside that plastic tube eventually gets a little too acidic or a little too crowded for them, so they slide back out through those same drilled holes and return to the cool soil of your garden bed. As they travel through the dirt, radiating outward from the tower, they leave behind their waste. That waste is worm castings, the absolute most nutrient-dense, perfectly balanced, biologically active fertilizer on the planet. And they are depositing it directly onto the microscopic root hairs of your tomato plants and pepper bushes. You didn't have to harvest it. You didn't have to carry a bucket. You didn't even have to bend over. The worms are acting as a subterranean delivery fleet, taking the fuel from the center and distributing it exactly where it is needed most. This process completely changes the architecture of your soil. Because the worms are constantly traveling back and forth from the food source to the outer edges of the bed, they are drilling thousands of tiny horizontal and vertical tunnels. These tunnels are like a superhighway system for your plants. When it rains, the water doesn't pool on the surface and evaporate anymore. It rushes down into those worm tunnels, soaking deep into the earth. And more importantly, the roots of your plants follow those exact same tunnels. Instead of fighting through hard, compacted dirt, your plant roots take the path of least resistance. They slide right down into the worm burrows, chasing the moisture and the rich castings left behind. This is how you get plants that are resilient. They are anchored deep into the soil, far away from the hot, dry surface. But the benefits of this $5 pipe go even further than just free fertilizer. You have also accidentally built the most efficient deep watering system imaginable, and it costs you nothing extra to use it. Think about the peak of summer, when the sun is brutal and the surface of your garden is baking. Usually, you stand there with a hose, spraying the top of the mulch, hoping the water penetrates. Most of it just evaporates into the hot air. But now you have a direct portal to the deep soil. When the dry days come, you simply take the lid off your worm tower and pour a gallon of water straight down the pipe. You are bypassing the evaporation zone entirely. That water fills the bottom of the pipe, mixing with the dark, rich compost tea that has naturally pooled down there from the breaking down of the kitchen scraps. Then it slowly seeps out through the holes, pushing that liquid gold deep into the root zone. You are deep feeding and deep watering your plants simultaneously, using a fraction of the water you would normally waste with a sprinkler. You will see the difference almost overnight. While the rest of the neighborhood gardens are drooping and fainting in the afternoon heat, your plants will stand tall. You will look out at your garden and see a shade of green that you usually only see in the spring. The leaves will be thick and sturdy. The stems will be massive. I started doing this in my raised beds a few years ago, placing one tower in the center of every 4 by 4 foot section. The results were staggering. My pepper yields easily doubled, and the tomatoes were heavier, sweeter, and entirely free of that dreaded blossom end rot, because they finally had consistent calcium and moisture at the root level. If you ever pull up a spent tomato plant at the end of the season next to one of these towers, you will be shocked by what you see. The root mass doesn't just spread out randomly, it actively seeks the pipe. You will find thick, white, healthy roots wrapped completely around the base of your plastic tower, hugging the holes where the nutrients seep out. The plant knows exactly where the life is coming from. It has tapped into the main vein of the soil, pulling everything it needs without you having to intervene. The maintenance on this system is practically non-existent. You just keep dropping your scraps in whenever you have them. A single pipe can handle the weekly kitchen waste of an average family without ever filling up, because the worms process it just as fast as you add it. If it ever does start to get too full, you simply stop feeding that specific pipe for a few weeks, let the worms finish off the rest, and then it is empty and ready to go again. You never have to clean it out. You never have to sift through it. You just let the biology run its course. Every scrap of food you put down that pipe is a handful of fertilizer you don't have to buy from the big box store. It is a plastic bottle of liquid feed that doesn't have to be manufactured, shipped, and sold to you at a massive markup. You are taking your own waste, keeping it on your own property, and turning it into immediate calories for your family. This is how a homestead is actually supposed to function. It is a closed loop. You are stepping out of the consumer cycle and stepping back into the natural order. You are working with the intelligence of the earth instead of fighting against it with expensive chemicals and back-breaking labor. You don't need a degree in agronomy or a massive budget to grow incredible food. You just need to understand the forgotten mechanics of the soil and give nature the tiny push it needs to do the heavy lifting for you. This $5 project changes everything about how a garden operates. I want you to try this immediately. Don't wait until next season. Grab a piece of scrap pipe, drill those holes, dig a quick hole in your garden and bury it. Throw your coffee grounds and banana peels in there tomorrow morning. Watch how the plants around it respond over the next month. Once you see that deep, wild green color return to your tomatoes, you will never buy another bag of synthetic fertilizer again. You will realize that the abundance you were searching for was already right there in the dirt. If this concept changes the way you look at your garden and your kitchen waste, please subscribe and like the channel. We are dedicated to uncovering the practical history and survival wisdom that they have tried to bury. Start harvesting your own future. The next treasure of forgotten knowledge will be revealed soon.